Yep.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, let's get things going. Exciting afternoon, full of talks here. I'm going to turn it over. My great pleasure to introduce over here, Derek Smith, former NHL player. His father, Julian Smith, and my good friend David Salter, who's joined us from the East Coast. Yeah. And so David's going to conduct this interview today, and really looking forward to this. And thank you, Derek, for bringing along some props too. So we're very, very, very excited to hear about that story. And hopefully we'll wrap up a little bit early so we can have some questions for you folks. I'm going to turn it over now to Dave.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Of course, here in London, Ontario, with here two London people here, Derek and his dad Julian. Derek, of course, was raised here in London and went on to play in the National Hockey League with the Buffalo Sabres and Detroit Red Wings. And Julian also was a pretty good hockey player himself. I believe went as far as the Quebec Aces in the old Quebec Senior League. And I guess ironically, as it turns out, eventually went on to a career in the printing industry, and the company that he worked for printed O-Pee-Chee hockey cards, which later his son Derek appeared on a few times. And Derek actually has a little prop with us here as well, and we'll talk about that. And of course, I think many of you probably know Derek's career in the National Hockey League, but maybe not so much Julian's background, his dad. So we'll start with Julian. Julian, tell me, I know you played hockey pretty much right across Canada, in Western Canada, in Quebec, and you played at Ryerson University. We were speaking about that last night. What would you say was the highlight of your hockey career? I know one of the guys you played with in Quebec, Punch Imlach, connecting ties again, later would draft your son with the Buffalo Sabres. There's a lot of synchronicity here. But tell me about the highlight of your hockey playing career.
Well, I guess the first part was playing in Regina, and I hadn't played hockey for 4 years. And I got a call on the phone one night asking if I'd be interested in coming out with the juniors. To make a long story short, I did go. I sat on the bench all year until the playoffs. And then the second year I played regularly, and then the team formed the Regina Pats again. And 1947 was my last year. Then I went to university in Saskatoon 1 year, and I wanted to go back to hockey, so I ended up with a training camp at Hershey. And then I found out I saw all the buses going and I wasn't on it. So I started looking and I ended up with the Quebec Aces and had a tryout and made the team. And the first year, Punch Imlach was the coach, playing coach. And I was on the line with him a few times, but mostly on the second line. And then the next year, Punch became the coach and manager. And I enjoyed the hockey, but I realized I wasn't going to go far. And so then I decided, what am I going to do? Go back to school or play for hockey a few more years? And I decided I had met my future wife, and I thought the best way is go back to school and build a career. So I ended up in the printing business.
And we talked a bit last night when we were just chatting, and it's just funny that you played with Punch Imlach. Then fast forward maybe about 20 years or so. Punch drafts your son. He's the general manager of the Buffalo Sabres, and I believe you had a conversation with him. You might have called him up and said, "Oh, by the way, that Derek Smith kid, that's my son." Tell me about that.
Well, the first time Punch came to a game in Ottawa, Derek was the captain of the Ottawa 67s. And Punch sat with my wife and me watching, and he wouldn't comment at all. You didn't know if he was looking at Derek or as somebody else. But anyway, then we find out that he's drafted Derek. And we were camping in Lake George. And so I grabbed the phone and called him, and I said, I don't think you really know who you've got with Derek, and I was wondering if you'd like to hear some more about him. He said, would you like to come to lunch at the Westbury Hotel which is behind the Maple Leaf Gardens? And we had lunch, and he said, we're having an exhibition game in London, and Derek will go and be playing. And Derek got 2 goals that game. So that was how the conversation went.
Yeah, the hockey world certainly a small one in the connection with Punch and I was going through Derek's draft and Derek was drafted in the 10th round, which of course, as hockey fans know now, no longer exists. So for him to persevere and get that far and have a successful career is pretty impressive. But when I was going through the draft, I remember 74. The Sabres drafted a really interesting player in 1974 as well, Taro Sugioto, in the 11th round. So that probably would have been embarrassing if he went ahead of you, because as we all know, that was a fictional Japanese hockey player who did not exist, and it was a PR stunt by the Sabres. But then, of course, you were drafted right before him. So to be that late in the draft, were you happy to just be drafted, or were you discouraged to go, maybe later than you might have thought you would?
I was discouraged a little bit that I went as late as I did because I was, hanging by the phone waiting for a call. Never did get one, not even that after I was drafted. But, playing in junior and if a player scored 50 goals, usually they were in the first couple of rounds. But the game was changing with Philadelphia playing their style of play. I was 160 pounds. I wasn't tough. And I think that had a lot to do with me moving down into the draft. And I was drafted by Houston on the WHA also. But they called and said they drafted me, but they didn't have any room for me at camp. So my decision was made where I was going to go. I went to the Buffalo camp and had a pretty good camp, and had a couple of guys that went to bat for me, including my dad. And got my foot in the door. I mean, if he hadn't had that conversation with Punch Imlach, who knows? I mean, 10th round pick doesn't usually get a look at.
Right.
And but once I had the foot in the door and it started to work out, it couldn't have worked out better, really.
Yeah, and you mentioned when we talked earlier that you went to Hershey initially after being drafted by Buffalo, because Buffalo had a very solid team, a lot of depth,
especially at center,
and particularly up front. You're right. A lot of depth, and a guy in Hershey who later briefly coached the Sabres and played with the Sabres, Billy Inglis, was a real champion of yours, and you said was very influential in your career.
That's when after camp was over, Punch Imlach was going to send me to Charlotte, which is in the Southern League. That was their third club, and Bill Inglis, who was kind of the same style of player as I was, kind of took me under his wing in training camp. He was 31, I was 20, and he actually went to Punch and asked if Punch would let him bring me to Hershey for 5-game tryout. To see if it would work, and it did work, and so I owe a lot to Bill Inglis for that opportunity, because when you get buried in the Southern League, and that's a tough league too, and that again wasn't my style, it may not have ever gotten past there. So I was fortunate.
So of course you eventually go on to the Buffalo Sabres, and when I was a kid, I was introduced to you through the 1978-79 O-Pee-Chee hockey cards, Derek Smith with the Cooper helmet on, and I remember that. But it must have been a cool moment for you. And because your dad, who worked for the printing company that did O-Pee-Chee hockey cards, would bring home hockey cards to you as a kid, and you might be looking for Frank Mahovlich or whatever.
Exactly.
Then one day, he brings home cards or sees the sheet of cards, and you're there.
Yeah.
Derek Smith is there. It must have just been a surreal experience for both of you. I'll start with your dad. I mean, what was it like to see your son on a hockey card? I can't imagine the feeling.
Well, it just was exciting, but another thing is our plant was right next to the McDonald's and Mandarin, In fact, we owned the whole lot, and our building had 350 employees. And where the pickle barrel is, that's where my first house was when I came to London. But anyway, in that plant, Scott Thornton and Brad Delgarno and Derek, our fathers all worked in that plant. And it's amazing, 3 NHL players with families in that one business. So seeing the cards, we were really excited, and I got sheets for 4 sons, and each run had 2 or 3 what we call layouts. In other words, you couldn't get all the cards on one sheet. It could be 2 sheets or 3 sheets. So the salesman wouldn't allow us to take sheets until the cards were actually out on the street. So then we would be allowed, and I'd get enough sets to give it to the family, and that's what we did with them.
Derek, what was the feeling like for you to see yourself on a hockey card? Also, I can only imagine very surreal.
It was. I mean, again, for me, all I wanted to do was play hockey when I was young, and people say, well, when did you know you were going to get there? And I think I was too stupid not to think I was. I mean, I thought that you play Pee Wee, Bantam, you play midget, then you play junior, then you go pro.
Yeah.
And maybe because I didn't think I wouldn't do it, that's why I did it. So, but it was very cool to have a hockey card. It's cool when people to this day ask you for your autograph. I think it is really neat, and I'll never take it for granted.
Do you remember the reaction when you first saw it? Your rookie card, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and I saw it on the sheet and brought home, and we at the time it was cool to be on there, but and my dad used to bring home the set. We were lucky. We had the first day they came out, we had the whole set.
Amazing.
And we'd cut them up and make in the pile and trade cards with everybody. And when I was playing pro, he would bring some home, and I'd give them to all the kids in the neighborhood, and we'd put them on the spokes for bikes and for a motor.
Yeah.
And I never kept them. And then when I finally retired in in 84, he brought me 3 sets that he had saved because he knew I was giving them all away.
Yeah. Right.
One of them is
Right. And that's your second year, 79, 80. We're going to look at. I don't know if you want to, maybe we can take that out now. Some people, like, I know this right now, I guess, is Derek Smith's second year hockey card.
Right,
Some
yeah.
people know it as Wayne Gretzky's rookie card as well. Also, and yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And as Julian pointed out, they would often come in 3 sheets, 396 cards of 3 sheets. So Wayne's rookie card just happened to be on the same sheet as Derek Smith's second card. And unfortunately, you can see the condition is not where Derek would like it to be. There's kind of a tear right where Wayne Gretzky would be, unfortunately. As you can see. Yeah, he's there. Where's Wayne? Wayne is right here. As you can see,
slightly devalued.
cover your eyes. And there is Derek right there. There's Derek and there's Wayne. Amazing. And
That sheet would be worth some money if it was in a little better shape than
and there's Gary Smith, who is not the Gary Smith. Also, yeah. So it's funny, and on the back of these cards, they have little cartoons. And I thought it was something to do. The back of your card was something to do with cars or whatever. But maybe you can tell them what the cartoon on the back of your card said.
That's on Sabres' most eligible bachelor.
This is just a half a sheet of what we were running.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure the players never let you forget
Oh,
that.
no. And then actually that year there was Danny Gare, if you remember him, Terry Martin and myself, we all lived together in Danny's house. And we were the only 3 single guys on the team. So there's
So you're-
2 eligible bachelors there too.
They're bachelor number 2, bachelor number 3. So you talk about your time. You mentioned Danny Gare. One of the best seasons in Sabres history was 79-80. Danny tied for the league lead in goals with 56, I think.
Yep.
With Blaine Stoughton, and who was the other guy? Charlie Simmer, and yourself. You were the centerman for,
Right.
for Danny that year, and his best season in the National Hockey League. And Tony McKegney, I believe, was the other winger
Left
there.
winger.
And the Sabres took the Islanders to 6 games in the semifinals.
Yep.
We're one of the best teams in the regular season, and of course, if you get past the Islanders, maybe you got a shot at a Stanley Cup, maybe a rematch with the Flyers and Sabres from '75. Scotty Bowman had just come in that season, and good known that he played some head games with
Yeah.
some players, but you managed to have a couple of really good seasons. I believe 60 points, 30 goals around that. Tell me about that breakthrough for you. Those couple years in Buffalo.
Well, I had Danny was on the right side. He had 56. Tony was on the left side, had 38, and I had 24, I think, that year. And we were talking before, we were kind of in a sweet spot because we had the French connection then, if you all remember them. So the checking line on the team we play would play them, and then our checking line would play their top line. So we were kind of in a good spot there for a couple of years. Now, eventually, everybody started pestering us, and which affected us. Then we ended up getting traded anyway after that. But we had a couple of really good years, and 104 goals for a line 2 years in a row was respectable, pretty good year. So, and 2 good buddies, we still keep in touch. They both live in Buffalo now. So, again, fortunate.
Well, I'll to ask you about Scotty Bowman. He traded you, so I know you probably didn't like that part of it. But what was your experience like playing there? Because you did have some productive seasons, your best seasons there with him.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of an intimidating coach, and when I look back at it now, I was a bit immature, letting it bother me like it did, and it did affect my play. But he had a knack of having the right guys on the ice at all times, and he did trade me. And I'll tell you the phone call I got. Well, first of all, the day before, one of my teammates, Jim Schoenfeld, and a couple other guys decided to prank me. So we get in the locker room at our practice facility, and they said they had Rip, the trainer, come in and say, the coach wants to see you in the office, which meant you're either traded or you're going to Hershey or Rochester, whatever. So I go in there, they all laugh, and it's funny. So the next night, I'm at home about 4:45 at night, and the phone rings, and I said, Scotty, and I said, oh yeah, I'm sure it is, and I started laughing. He says, no, Derek, it's Scotty, and this is exactly the conversation. He said, we made a trade with Detroit. They want you there tonight. I can't talk anymore right now, but I'll catch up with you later.
Wow.
That was my phone call.
Wow. And you could argue that they, other than maybe Gilbert Perreault, ripped the heart out of the Sabres. I mean, that was Danny Garrett, your captain, just coming off a 56-goal season. Jim Schoenfeld, former captain, and coming off his best season in 79-80. I believe he was a second-team All-Star. Yourself and goaltender Bob Sauvé, all to Detroit for McCourt, who had just gone through a nightmare of staying in Detroit.
Right.
LA was trying to get him in compensation, and Mike Foligno, who ended up, I guess, ultimately being the key to that trade. But a massive trade, and we talked earlier the anatomy of the Phil Esposito trade. That would be an interesting one to go through as well, because people were debating who had got the best of that deal. But I think ultimately, Detroit ends up losing Sauvé back to Buffalo in free agency, and things unfortunately didn't work out for you there, nor did it for Jim Schoenfeld. He was only there for a year or so. Detroit was, probably at some of their lowest stages. Just, the Illiches, I think, had just maybe purchased or were about to purchase the team. A year or two later, you get Steve Yzerman and things start to change, but it was a tough time to be in Detroit, and I can't imagine, coming from Buffalo and the fan support that you got there, and how beloved the team was. Detroit, I think, they were at the lowest of rock bottom. Yes. So what, obviously, just tell us a little bit about Detroit and maybe why you think things didn't work out for yourself, or maybe even some of the other guys involved in that trade.
Yeah, Detroit, we were awful when we got there, and Bruce Norris had owned the team that year, and we were the first team eliminated from the playoffs earlier than most teams ever, ever do. Joe Louis Arena seats 22,000 people. We were getting 4, which it's like a practice, really.
Yeah.
And those 4 would boo us in warm-up, their home team. So it was ugly for a while. Then the next year, Mike Ilitch bought the team, and we still were bad. But what he did that year is he gave someone in the crowd that night a new car. So for 41 games, he gave out a car. So people started coming, you know, I could get a car. And then, and the people started coming and the team started playing better. They drafted Steve Eiserman, who ended up taking my job, which was a pretty good move on their part, I think. And then the whole thing started to snowball. I mean, everybody was into hockey again, and he really did a great job of turning that whole place around.
Spoke earlier today about going on to Adirondack, I guess, to finish out your career with the Red
Yeah.
Wings Boyd's farm team, which kind of a relative, maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you're going to be in the American Hockey League, it's kind of a soft landing there in Glens Falls.
Yeah.
Beautiful, you know, the Adirondacks there, and a lot of guys, we'll talk maybe about the Sabres and they're great alumni, but a lot of former Adirondack players, you mentioned Greg Jolly, Pete Mahovlich, a lot of the guys, you know, stayed there after their careers. Tell me about your experience there in Adirondack.
We really had a good time. I mean, I knew it was the end of my career, but we had a lot of fun. You know, you weren't allowed to ski, but when you're in your last year, probably, who cares if they scold you? I mean, we went skiing anyway. And I remember one time, like Bill Deneen was our coach, who was also a great guy and great coach for me anyway. So we're on a ski lift and we're coming up a ski lift, and there's Bill Deneen skiing below us. So I didn't feel as bad about it, but it was a great town. Everybody was nice there. The support was great there. And a lot of other guys on the team were in the same position as I was, like Eric Vale and Greg Jolly. They were, Kenny Holland, we're all at the end of our careers. So it was a little bit less stressful.
You mentioned when we spoke today as well about Don Murdoch.
Yeah.
He was an interesting character and had a short, colorful NHL career. He was there
Yep.
in Adirondack.
Mhm.
Maybe tell me a little bit about him. I know Detroit, he gave up a first-round draft pick to get him, thinking that they could rescue him, and it never worked out. But you enjoyed him as a teammate.
Yeah, my wife and I and his wife and him, we hung out quite a bit together. And he was a very good friend of Danny Gare also. So I knew him before a little bit. But he's just a happy-go-lucky guy. He was still a pretty good player. But there was no stress there with him at all. So it was fun. You know, the playing hockey then was more fun at the time because you're playing more, just playing hockey rather than the pressure of the NHL, which I didn't handle well. And that's my own fault.
When you come to the end of your days in Detroit, and one might assume you might have looked at Europe as an option to extend your career, but I understand you might have had an opportunity to go full circle and come back to Buffalo with the Sabres, but you decided to go another route and I guess ultimately end your hockey career. Tell us about the Sabres offer and what else was on your plate at that time.
Well, after the Detroit had bought out my last year contract, so when I was 30, that was the end. I did belong to a golf club in Buffalo, and I joined the same day that Scotty Bowman joined the same club. So there was some golf event or something, and we happened to be on the first tee together. And he says, "Would you like to come back to Buffalo for a couple of years?" And he offered me another 2-year contract. And I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do that anymore, but I had that contract on my kitchen counter. And I had another contract with a company, New York Life, which is an insurance company. And I'd been with them worked all summer just to try to find out if there's something else I could do. And I realized after that summer that I could make it work if I had to. So I ended up sending Scotty his contract back, and I ended up going in the insurance business. And it turned out well because I did that for 40 years after my career. And it just turned out, it worked out very well.
And like a lot of former Buffalo Sabres, You ended up returning, I guess, as you said, you did not return to play there, but you
Yeah.
returned to live there and work there, like I said, a lot of Buffalo alumni did. Tell me about the alumni association and why that part of the country is so popular for former players to stick around in.
Buffalo's just a neat town. I would have never, when I got drafted there, I didn't want to go there. I didn't have a choice, but I remember my first year, we were given working visas. So on June 1st, we were expected to leave the States and go back to Canada. And I went back to London to live with my parents for the summer. And I remember Terry Martin went back to Barrie to do the same thing. And June 2nd, the day after, I called I call him T. And I said, I don't know about you, but I'm going back. And he said, so am I. And we met back in Buffalo on June 2nd. And that's 50 years ago. It's still there. So and it's the people there. Now we did start an alumni association, and because a lot of guys stick around in Buffalo, so we're strong. A lot of participation. We have 3 major events we do. We do the golf tournament. We're over $1 million in scholarships now. We've given out. My wife and a couple other wives started a wine festival fundraiser, and they've given over $2 million to Roswell, which is a cancer hospital in Buffalo. And we have other events and charities we give it. So it's gone really well. The guys like Buffalo, they stick around. It's a little bit different now because a lot of players are European and they have a lot more money now too. So they're spending time either in Europe or Malibu or someplace like that. So, but we still have a strong alumni association. Rob Ray, who you all remember, I'm sure, is our president. We meet, 2 or 3 times a year at our board, and it's very successful.
Who would you say during your career? Sounds like you were a great teammate, but who was maybe your favorite player to play with, or best friend, maybe your hockey career?
I stayed pretty close with Danny Gare, Jim Schoenfeld. I just vacationed with him a couple of weeks ago. Gilles Perreault, who's not in Buffalo, he lives in Victoriaville, but he's still one of my the guys that I like to hang around with. Just a good guy. But there's so many. There's so many guys. And Terry Martin's a very close friend. I'm with him all the time. There's quite a few guys that still are around, and we do stay in touch.
What would you say was the highlight of your career, or maybe the thing you're most proud of?
The most proud of I was when I ended up in Detroit, I was given the assignment of shadowing Wayne Gretzky. And I was a defensive player in Buffalo, but then when I got to Detroit, they made me a defensive player. So that game, I was wherever he went, I had to go with him, and shadow him. And my claim to fame now is I held him to 5 points. So that's the highlight.
Yourself, your son had a very successful National Hockey League career. Obviously, a very proud dad. But what are some of the things that stand out for you about his career?
Well, just like I remember we went to see a game in Toronto, and after the game we see Derek outside the dressing room, and it would be fun talking, but of course we had to go home to London ourselves, and we were driving down the QEW there, and ahead of us was the Sabres bus, and our son's in there, and we have sort of tears in our eyes because we can't be with them, and we won't see him for another few weeks again. So there's moments like that were tough, and if he got hurt, you were worried too, and he did get a very serious injury in a practice game, and you could tell about that, Derek, when you got injured on your.
It was actually training camp in St. Catharines, and we had the option. I was grandfather, so I didn't have to wear a helmet if I didn't want to. So I thought I was going to be cool and not wear a helmet that year. And I was flying down the left side in the exhibition game, and there's a kid named Kenny Breitenbach who was known for his hip checks. And he came across, and I saw him coming across. I tried to jump over him, and I hit his butt with my skates, and I went right into the glass, and then came down and hit the edge of the boards and land on the ice. And of course, I was out, but I got, split wide open here. And it had to be serious enough because Punch Imlach actually came into the training room to see if I was okay, and he didn't usually do that for anybody. So, but that back then, the next day I was on the ice. Now today I've been out for probably months just with a concussion protocol, but back then it was a little different. But that was
Punch phoned us and let us know that he'd been seriously hurt. And it was nice that there's that closeness with Punch and our family.
Yeah, and speaking, I guess Derek mentioned about not being necessarily, I don't know if I should be using both of these, excited about being drafted by Buffalo, but I'm thinking you probably were, because next to maybe Toronto, that would be the closest for you if you wanted to go to a game. So was that kind of what you were thinking? At least it's close by. He's not going to LA or somewhere like that?
I guess we were just happy.
That's me. I'm getting confused, not you.
We were happy that he was playing with any team, but of course it was nicer that it was close, that we could go and see his games and follow him more closely.
Sorry, what's that? Just use the blue one, okay. Yeah, I don't know how much time we have, Mike, or we want to do some questions now, or yeah, I think that's, yeah. So if anyone has any questions for these gentlemen, go ahead.
We have to pass the blue one, John, or can we use the other? Okay. Derek, I wanted to ask, when you got the whole set of cards at the start of the season, did you get the entire set of bubble gum that came with it?
I love that.
Separate company.
Hi, there's a question I've asked a few former players in the past. If there was something about today's hockey that you could have had when you were a player, other than money, what would it be?
Easy one. Travel. I mean, I've been fortunate because I have two sons that are, one's involved with the New York Islanders. He's on the coaching staff, and the younger one's with the New York Rangers. Same thing. They're the video, challenge. They have to during the challenges during the games. That's their job is to do that. So I was fortunate enough to go on a father's trip with each one of them. The NHL stands for the Never Hungry League. The way they travel, they're on the best plane you can have. They're all first class seats. They stay in the best hotels in every city. That's part of the CBA. They eat breakfast, brunch, lunch, another brunch, dinner. And then after the game, they put pizza and wings or something like that from that city out the dressing room to tide them over till they get on the plane when they get a menu. So it's truly amazing. The equipment and the travel is so much better. We used to fly commercial. We were sitting with everybody else on the plane, not even together, and always late in airports. Then we eventually started to use a charter, but it was just like a little DC-3. We won a big game when I was with Buffalo against the Islanders, and the deal was for us back then. There was just 2 cases of beer on the bus. Every player got two beers. Now we knew the guys on the team that didn't drink beer, so we had to race to the back to get their beer too. So we all run up the stairs. The whole team's in the back fighting over a case of beer. The pilot comes running down the aisle. I need some of you guys up here. You lifted the front of the plane off the ground. So that's how big our plane was. But yeah, travel would be the answer to that question.
I'll start with Andrew, then we'll go to Gary.
You just got me curious here. If Gare was on your line in 79-80, who replaced him on Loose and Ramsey's?
So you have to wait for.
Also on that sheet of cards, Rick Sealing.
Yeah. And he did a great job. He was perfect for that line also. They were tough. It was miserable to play against them in practice, you know, and in the scrimmage. They were just clutching, grabbing. They cheated a lot, but it didn't matter in practice. You could get away with it.
Yeah, Derek, last night we had an interesting discussion about the importance of a good agent. And I wonder if you could speak about that. And I believe you said that you managed your own money. So just that is such an important issue of an agent who's looking after you from when you're very young and how things can go right or how things can go wrong.
Yeah, I play with quite a few guys that gave too much power to their agents. I mean, they did well in the negotiation part of it, but then they controlled their money, and a lot of them got burnt pretty good on it. One of my closest friends, he lost his condo in Florida to his agent. He had a Bentley, and his agent somehow got that and $250,000 in cash. So, and that's because, you know, he gave him too much power. He had power of attorney to make moves and things like that. My first year in Hershey, I ended up living with a guy named Jack Serby, who was from Alberta, Panoka, Alberta, I think, a veteran in the American Hockey League. And he was kind of our house mother. He kind of taught us. He would pay the bills, do all the work, and then he'd collect from us. And after he ended up moving on, I started to do that. I lived with 3 guys my first year, three or 4 guys the second year, and I became that guy. So I kind of learned from him. But a lot of agents will do that for the players, and now they make so much money they need someone to invest their money and all that. But you really got to trust them, because there's a lot that are doing it for their own benefit rather than the benefit of the player. But I think it's very important, and we learned a lot by sometimes the hard way, but we learned.
This question's for Julian. Julian, I noticed that one of the centermen you played with in Quebec was Herb Carnegie. And a few of us have talked about him, and one member here almost wrote a book about him. I would love to know your impressions of Herb and also how he was treated when he was on the team.
Thank you for the question. I really appreciate that. I remember Herb coming into the dressing room. There was a trade with Sherbrooke, and they had the 3 blacks on a line, which were very good. Ozzy and Herbie Carnegie, and Manny McIntyre was the 3rd one. And they had a great team, but in the summer, Punch traded some of our players and got Herb, and Ozzy and Manny went their own way. And anyway, Herb dressed like a gentleman with a nice cashmere coat and hat. And he stayed by himself. He didn't run around or anything. And as a player, I played with him killing penalties a lot. And I would get the puck. I was very good defensively, but not offensively. And Herb would get a goal many times. And the other thing about him is I had met my future wife, and Herb and I were talking one day, and he says, Smitty, I want to give you some advice with your future wife. Don't sweat the small stuff. And actually, I remember that to this day, and I followed that rule. And we had such a wonderful marriage, my wife and I. But Herb was a golfer too, and he's won some amateur championships. I'm not sure about in Quebec, but in Toronto. And he also set up for young blacks a sports system, and he has an arena named after him now. I have another friend that was the captain of the Ryerson team, and I told him about Herb and introduced him to Herb, and so he's been very thankful to me too. But Herb was a wonderful man. And oh, I should tell you, he came back from trying out with the Rangers, and we were glad that he'd come back. He was kind of quiet and never said anything, but he continued playing very well with the Aces. But in later years, I heard the news that he had been offered a contract with a farm team, and he was good enough to be in the NHL. So he decided, I'm not going to do that.
Questions?
It came up last night at the event. Dave Hutcherson talked about the famous brawl between the 72, I think it was 1972, the London Knights and the Ottawa 67s. Kind of the hockey world, again, as we've all know, is so small that both you guys played in that game. And it came up today, earlier this morning, about Bronco Horvath, who apparently was, I guess, the London coach at the time. You played in that game with the 67s against Dave Hutchinson's London Knights. And of course, as we all know, there was quite a melee there, to say the least. What are your recollections of that night, and I guess maybe that series?
Well, I was terrified. With back then, obviously, when the fight starts, it turns into a brawl. Everybody pairs off. But this one was just a complete mob of. I can't remember how it all started, but Dave Hutchinson was a tough guy with London. They also had a guy named Pat Boutet, was a tough guy. And there was a tough team, and we weren't really that way. I think we were a better team. I think we end up. I can't remember if we beat them or they beat us. I think. Yeah. So, but I remember there's another kid that was tough in London, and he was a good friend of mine. His name was Mike Boland. And as the benches cleared, because I'm not a tough guy and I'm not a big guy, I'm looking for another guy that's not tough and not big to pair off, and because I knew Mike Bull, I tried to grab onto him, and he knew what his job was, and he said, he apologized to me. He said, Smitty, I can't do it. I got to get in there. So, and he got right in the middle of the scrum, and I can't remember who I ended up with, but it was a nasty night. After the game, Hutchinson was accused of kicking one of our defensemen, Ray Antilla, in the face. What really had happened was Ray had fallen and landed on Dave Hutchinson's skate, I think, was what really happened. So there was a lot of controversy about that, and we had a meeting the next morning, I think, because we had to go back to London and play there again. And Bill Long, I'm pretty sure it was Bill Long. It could have been Leo Boyden, but whoever the coach was said, "You guys have the option. If you don't want to go to London to play, we're not making anybody play." So we all end up going, and I guess we won, right, in the long run. But that was an ugly game, and that happened way too much. I mean, I didn't like that part of the game, but it was part of the game.
Other questions? Oh, now people are inspired.
You brought up Mike Boland, who just passed, and I'm just wondering about the alumni just themselves and you guys keeping in touch with each other, and when something like that happens, how quickly you guys all spread the word within each other. Mike was at my book launch for the Gilles Graton book because he was good buddies with Gilles and was one of the guys out creating havoc in the WHA.
Well, I grew up playing against, we call him Bobo, was his nickname. He played for Huron Heights or Huron East or whatever. We played against each other going up all the way through, so he was a very good friend of mine. Our alumni, if you played one game or he was even on the score sheet for a game, we have one goalie on our alumni that didn't play a game, but he was the backup goalie for one game, called up from Rochester. or you live in Buffalo, you're a part of our alumni. And we have a mailing list and a contact list. So anything that happens, and you know, in a case like Bobo, everybody knows the next day. And we had a nice service for him in Buffalo, and then we had another one in London. You may have been there. But he was just such a good guy, but he had a couple issues that caught up to him and ended up killing him in the long run.
I wanted to ask a question to both of you. As kids, who was your favorite player and why?
For me, originally Jean Beliveau, and then it became Gilles Perreault. I saw him play in London, junior game in London. I thought he was magic. So he became idol, and you know, 4 years later, we're on the same line, which was a neat experience for me.
My first hero was Howie Morenz. He had broken his leg and passed away. I never knew anything about him till the newspapers that day. And I was a peewee hockey player. So anyway, he was my hero. Later on, it was Gordie Howe, who also played in the league. And then Beliveau was our final hero.
Don Murray can tell you what happened to Morenz.
So Derek, Smith is a fairly common name, so I'm just wondering if you ever got a phone call from Eddie Shore saying you've been traded to Springfield and don't forget to bring your goalie pads. And then the other one in Detroit, there's another guy named Smith, Brad Smith, Motor City Smitty. Have you ever been mistaken for him?
I never met Eddie Shore officially, but I heard that story. But Brad Smith is another good friend because I played with him in Detroit, and he was one of my favorites. We actually his nickname is Edmo Beagleson. That's the way he is. But he's a great guy, and we had a lot of fun together with him too. And there's a lot of other Smiths that played.
I think we're good on, yeah. So what we'll do now, sorry, what do we have at 2:30? I forgot my, Rich is at 2:30. So maybe we'll do some photos, and if people want a photo with our special guests, we'll do that right now and then reconvene in 15. Oh,
Case that I sent over was Frank Sheffield. For a moment, I couldn't remember his name, but he's been quite a help to me too.
perfect.
Thank you, everyone.
Give me the option. In that day one. Spot. I'm just trying to use 36. Um, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay, I think it's working now.
Oh, very good. I'm just it went off. Different. You look a bit fed up, Maury. Yeah, what's that doing?